Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this session. We have as a speaker Aisling Tobin, who is in the Irish Penal Reform Trust, Ireland's leading non-governmental organization campaigning for rights in the penal system and reform of penal policy. Aisling is the project coordinator for IPRT's Children and Families Initiative, and she will be presenting on this initiative today. We remind you that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A window in Zoom, and we'll go over those at the end of the presentation. Ashley, I'll give you the floor now.
Thank you very much. I suppose before starting this presentation, I would like to introduce you to, my background. I've worked in the area of youth justice for over 15 years, and it was in this time I encountered a large proportion of children who have had currently had a parent or parents in prison. So we had done statistics, and it was in 2022 we had 57% of young people in the youth justice that had a parent, one or both parents in prison. When a young person was referred to us, it was in the youth justice system. It was our role to work on them on a diversion and a prevention method in order to prevent them going into the area of the court system and ending up in the detention centre. I suppose Ireland has one detention centre, which is Oberstown. So we were faced with the challenges as a result of having a parent in prison. I suppose it wasn't our role to work directly, and finding kind of services and support for these young people was very problematic. So in November of this year, I started this role with the Children and Family Initiative, which works for action for children and family of prisoners. So I suppose today is kind of centered around looking at the kind of impact that it has. So first I want to start off with kind of some statistics. So globally, approximately 2.7 million children have at least one parent behind bars, with at least 5 million having experienced. Sorry? Is everything okay? Okay, I'll continue going. But at least 5 million having experienced parental imprisonment at some point in their lives. Now, in Ireland, it is estimated that there are 5,000 children with a parent in prison, and on any given day, with over 10,000 children affected each year. Now, IPRT done what was called our PIPS report, which is the progress in the penal system. And in 2022, they recorded that the number of physical visits recorded with at least one child aged under 18 presented was 14,238, with a total of 17,646 children attending an in-person visit. So they're quite high numbers. So what are the impacts of parental and family imprisonment on children? So I suppose imprisonment of either parent is challenging for children, affecting many aspects of their lives. The imprisonment of a household member is often cited as one of the 10 adverse childhood experiences, which are the ACEs, which have a significant negative impact on children's long-term health and well-being, school attainment, and later life experience. Research would also show that the more ACEs a child experiences, the more likely that they are to suffer with lifelong issues, including health problems, they're including psychological and behavioural issues. Some of these behaviours can contribute to an individual coming into the attention of the youth justice system. Although in Ireland there is limited research to state that children impacted by parental imprisonment end up in the youth justice system, we would know that every child with a parent in prison will be negatively impacted, and that some do end up in the criminal justice system. In Oberstown, there were statistics done, and it showed that between 31% and 54% of children on the campus during 2017 to 2019 had a separation from a parent, either due to death, imprisonment, or parental separation. We would also be aware that many of the children are subjected to additional traumatic exposures, both prior and following the imprisonment of a parent or household member. And this would be the likes of poverty, neglect, addictions, and physical and emotional neglect. And many of these young people also end up, from my experience, end up in the criminal, leaving school very, very early. But also, I suppose, I would have a lot of experience of working directly on the ground. So one particular, issue that what I've seen would be, I suppose, poverty. Poverty would have been a huge, huge problem for parents that would end up with a family member in prison. I suppose in Ireland specifically, we would have a lot of their social welfare would be taken from the family. So income would cause a lot of people to be, in food poverty, and basic supplies. They would be in poverty in relation to that. And we would have seen a lot of parents having to go into criminal justice system as a result of shoplifting. And, that has been something that I've seen a lot on the ground as a result of one of the parents having to go to prison. I suppose, sorry, change the slide. I suppose there's been a lot of work, and so I can't take the credit for all the work done in the IPRT over since 2012 in relation to children and families of prison. So Ireland, IPRT were the first to cast a spotlight on children and families of prison in Ireland, and they produced a report called Picking Up the Pieces, the Rights and Needs of Children Affected by Imprisonment and Families Affected by Imprisonment. And this kind of highlighted the issues that families had faced and the problems that they encountered as a result of a family member being in prison. So IPR also worked with researchers in UCC, which is University College Cork, and the Children's Rights Alliance to develop the principles of action for children with a parent in prison. And in May 2020, IPRT also received funding for a 3-year project that aimed to reduce harm for children and families with a family member in prison. And then as a result of that, they also gained in 2023 extra funding to run a 3-year program with a full-time project coordinator. So that's where I came involved. And this was to drive the program. But in 2022, there was also a report completed, which was the Piecing It Together, the rights and needs of children and families affected by imprisonment. And this reviewed the previous report in 2012 and placed 7 recommendations that I'm currently trying to enroll in the country. So the recommendations that were highlighted in the Piecing It Together, supporting children and family with a family member in prison, and I'm going to go through them now for you. So it was increased national recognition of the rights of children with a family member in prison. Also, there was to establish a national support service for children and families with a family member in prison, and to improve prison visiting procedures and conditions for children and families. It also was to enshrine in law and practice the principle of prison as a last resort for primary caregivers, to improve data recording on children affected by imprisonment, and to challenge stigmatization of children and family with a family member in prison, and to promote and facilitate family involvement during the period of imprisonment. So I suppose following these 7 recommendations, the IP are doing a huge amount of work for children and families in prison. So as I said, we are already trying to implement the 7 recommendations set out in the Piecing It Together with children and families with a family member in prison. So in order to do that, we have established the Action for Children and Family of Prisoners Network. So this would involve, it's a network bringing together people that are working on the ground with family and children impacted by imprisonment, those with lived experience, researchers, and those with that work in the area of advocacy. So it could be in the area of Bernardos who are not directly working with children and families impacted by imprisonment, but will be advocating for children indirectly. So these were the idea behind the network, was kind of to bring together, information, ideas, and improvements that I suppose I could advocate as being chair of this on their behalf to meetings with the Irish Prison Service, but also with submissions to the government departments. So, like more recently, I would have met with the Irish Prison Service. So I'm working very closely with them in relation to looking at recruitment of a families connection worker, which at the moment the Irish Prison Service in Ireland don't have. So we're trying to look at that, which would this person will specifically work, improving standards for visits, but also improving relationships with family members, through contact and visits, but also through supports both on the outside and the inside of the prison. So also a part of this would be submission to government departments. I suppose more recently we have put a submission into the National Framework for Children and Young People, and we're hoping that children of people in prison will be included in this national strategy. Also, we've become more recently a member of the Children of Prisoners Europe network, so that would we were working very closely with our European counterparts to see what is happening across Europe, and try to implement it into Ireland, and to see, will it meet the needs of our young people and families of prisoners. So also part of this will be to have regular meetings. As I said, I would have regular meetings with the Irish Prison Service and government departments, and trying to get these young people on the agenda to improve visiting conditions, and to make them more child friendly. I suppose a lot of work has been done with the Irish Prison Service. They would have had a rollout for in-cell phones. So currently in Ireland, we have 11 prisons out of 14 that have in-cell phones. So prisoners can now make 3 phone calls of 10 minutes, but they also can receive phone calls from their loved ones, and which is very progressive. And also there is video booths in line. So currently there are, I suppose thanks to COVID, there has been video booths in place where parents can video call with their children. And I suppose it's now going to be rolled out where we'll have more access and wider availability of it. So I suppose another project that we're currently running is a collaborative book project. So this is quite of a new initiative. It's the first time it's been done in Ireland. And this involves the creation of a book by children impacted by parental or family imprisonment. Part of this project also involves the creation of an educational toolkit with the aim of piloting this initiative to the homeschool liaisons that work in national and secondary schools in the area. It aims to educate the wider community about the impact of imprisonment on young people, with the aim of reducing stigmatization and creating a wider understanding of their needs. Through the Collaborative Book Project, there is also a research being conducted. So the research isn't, the form hasn't been completely structured down now, but in evaluation process, and we'll look at the impact that this project has on young people and also on the wider community. Has it changed their ideas and their understanding of the impact that having a family member can have on a young person? So also part of my work with us is on advocacy on behalf of children and family of prisoners at events and meetings, and also conduct research. At the moment, we're doing a briefing paper on the impact of overcrowding and staff shortages on children and families of prisoners. And also we're hoping in the near future to conduct research on the impact of stigmatization on children that have a parent or a family member in prison. So now we're kind of looking at reducing the impact of parental family imprisonment. So what do we need? What needs to happen to reduce the impact? And firstly is national recognition. In Ireland, we don't have any national recognition for children and family of prison. They are not embedded in any policies or governmental policies or strategies. And this is something that we are pushing for. We would like to see young people being identified as a cohort group that needs specific supports and have specific needs. Also, which is a huge issue for us in Ireland, and particularly when you're looking for getting services for these young people, is the data. We don't have any publicly available data to tell us how many children or families are impacted by imprisonment. And this is something that we are campaigning for and advocating for. Without this data, we don't know how many children are impacted. We're saying between 5,000 daily to 10,000 yearly, but that is very much average. And now with the growing growing problem of overcrowding in the prison system, we would assume that we would have a lot more parents and children impacted by this. So with this, we also need support services. As I said in my opening, I've worked on the ground, so I would have seen the gap in services on a frontline basis. So this is something that I think really needs for money to be put into, is providing support services to these children. These have specific needs. We have supports for children that have a bereavement, and we have supports for children that have a parental separation, but we don't have any support service for children that are separated due to a family imprisonment. We do have non-government funded charity funded organisations, and I don't think this is sufficient enough when we can't guarantee that these will be properly funded and can give the service that they should be able to provide. So I think it's something that the government really needs, because these are a growing population. One thing that's very important, and I would have worked very closely with my colleagues and also in my previous role, was engaging the voice of the family members. There is, I suppose, from my understanding, we need to develop a service with the people that meets their needs. So that means working very closely with the family members and hearing their voices, and working at co-designing and co-producing initiatives with those with the experience. There is no point us as services assuming we know what these specific people need, or what their what services that they would require. So it's important to have them engaged, and we do in our network. We would have people with lived experience engaged. And we also do a lot of collaborative work, and through the collaborative book project, we will be engaging the voice of the children. So this is, for me, this is a very important part of it, and for my colleagues in IPRT. Also is, ensuring that prison is being used as a last resort, particularly for mothers. So that's important to ensure that we have an alternative option, and that we have the court system understanding the needs, that there is children, and understanding the needs and providing alternatives to imprisonment, particularly for minor offences. So the benefits, what are the benefits of supporting children and families of prisoners? I suppose the first one, and the most important one, particularly when you're looking at reducing the number of people going to prison, is reducing recidivism rates. So if rehabilitation and family relations are supported, we will see the reduction in people reoffending. The problem in Ireland, we would see, is the short sentences. So we would see people going in for up to 3 months, possibly less. And because they're in for such a short period of time, they are not getting rehabilitation, and they're not getting the option of rehabilitation. So very often you would see that they are reoffending and coming back into the prison system. But I think, when building on relations and ensuring that they have a support network around them when they do return to the community and they're integrated into the community, this will ensure that we will see a reduction in crime rate. Also, preventing a breakdown in family relations. Now, this is one thing I would have seen a lot when I worked on the ground. One particular case would have been where a young person was imprisoned for 6 months, and by the time he was released, I would point out as well, there was a huge travel distance, and there was no transport available to go for visits. So he had no relations with his family for the 6 months. When he returned, his partner had a new partner, and he was left homeless, and there was no relation. The relationship broke. That particular young man, he ended up committing crime that evening and to get back into prison. And that is, as I say, reoffending. It is a problem. If there's breakdown of relationship, there will be a probability that these people will reoffend. So also improving relationships. I suppose we would see on the ground that sometimes those involved in criminal activities are, there is a lot of trauma being impacted on the family, particularly the children, and relationships do become quite fragile. So I would have seen a huge improvement in relationships when a parent was placed in prison and they got the opportunity to get to know their children through FaceTime, to engage in storybook telling, and interacting, particularly on the face-to-face phone calls and the in-person phone calls. And it is a positive way to improve relationships. So when they return to the community, that these relationships are in a positive state. Also, reducing children's exposure to trauma. Imprisonment of a parent is one of the 10 ACEs that impacts a young person. And as well as that, when you have a mother placed in prison or a primary caregiver placed in prison, sometimes these children end up in care or in care of another family member. There's also poverty. There's the impact of poverty when you have the primary caregiver going to prison and there is a lack of income coming into the home. This will cause poverty, which is another exposure to trauma. So I suppose looking at alternatives and, ensuring that a parent doesn't go to prison will show that, will reduce the exposure to trauma, particularly for children. So then also breaking the stigma of imprisonment. We've seen that young people have a lot of fear and guilt and embarrassment by a parent or family member going to prison. So I suppose, this kind of in supporting a young person, like the creative book, educating people about the impact it can have on the wider community and on the young person, is important because it does break down the stigma. It's, there's not the child. Becomes a victim, and when they shouldn't be. They haven't done anything wrong, and the family are the victim of somebody else's behaviours. So that this can impact and relieve this stigma. Reducing the fear and guilt on children and family, making it it's not their fault, and that they have done nothing wrong, and that's important. As well, you'd have some of the family member, if and I would have seen this on the ground when I was working, if it's owing money for drugs, if it's drug related, that doesn't go away when the person goes to prison, and you have the people on the outside living in fear that they could be intimidated or worse, due to owing money. So I think this is important that reducing the level of stigmatization and reducing the fear and guilt that children, that there's something wrong, protect them, ensure there's somewhere safe for them to go, to ensure there's somewhere they can turn to and protect them when they need it. And then also it encourages rehabilitation. Most of the collaborative work that I would have done with people in prison would have said their family was the main focus of why they wanted to rehabilitate, and that needs to be encouraged and supported. But also when they are released from prison, that we have the supports there, that they will integrate back into community, and the rehabilitation will have been worth the effort that they've put in, but to be able to support it, to be supported by a wraparound service. Okay, so I suppose it's time for questions. I don't think I kept you for the whole 30 minutes, but I'm open to any questions that you may have. And I'm also going to leave up a last slide so that you have, you can link in or email me or look at our stuff online. So to keep up to date what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisling, for this presentation on such a great initiative by the Irish Penal Reform Trust. We have a few questions and we have a few minutes left. The first question, what are some of the challenges in executing this initiative? And what challenges can you speak of in terms of actually supporting children and families?
Okay, so some of the challenges supporting children and families would have been, I suppose I'll speak about that first. I would have found the fear. Some of the parents didn't want to disclose what was after happening because of the stigmatization of having a person in prison. So they would have had the fear. It would have been a challenge, particularly for the children. They wouldn't have been that honest. So there was a level of mistrust within the home. One particular case I would have found very challenging would have been, it would have been one of our ethnic minorities. It would have been an Irish traveller. And they did not want their children knowing that their father was in prison. And for me, this was very, very challenging because the children had disclosed that they knew. But the mother was adamant that they were not to be told. So the children didn't realise the mother had known, and the mother didn't realise the children were aware. So there was a level of mistrust and secrecy. So to gain support for that particular family, for none of them wanted to be open or honest, was very challenging. And it would have challenged me as a professional, but also challenged other professionals, because if they weren't going to be able to discuss what was happening and talk about their emotions and talk about the impact it had on them, there was not a huge amount services could do. So that was a huge challenge. Also, it was the gap of services as well, where you go to look for services. Each family is very different, and each family needs services that are tailored to meet their needs. And that was problematic, because there wasn't specific services for this issue, this problem that families had. Then we would have also, the challenges would be trying to get recognition for these children. Because we don't have any statistics, we don't know how many children we're dealing with, and this is problematic. So when I'm engaging with government departments, particularly the Department of Children, Department of Justice, they would all go back to, but we don't have statistics to back up why we would be engaging these as a cohort group. So this is very, very challenging, and something that we are working on. And I would have had a meeting with the Irish Prison Service, and that we are due to have a meeting with the Department of Children to look at how we can get statistics that are correct. I suppose that's a challenge as well, that people can lie to you, people don't have to disclose that they have children. So it's to make sure we have the most sufficient data that we can have. So I'm finding a way that will be the best data we can find. I hope that answers your question. I can go on talking a lot.
Thank you. Another question: what are some specific areas of research that are still needed / could be better developed towards support of children and families?
I suppose a big area that I would say at the moment is youth justice, and we do not have statistics on how many young people end up in the criminal justice system as a result of having a parent in prison. There is very outdated research in that, so we don't actually know. I would know from working on the ground that it would be a high percentage, but I couldn't back that up with national statistics, because there is none. So that's a gap. There is a lot of research at the moment going on, particularly around the impact of maternal imprisonment on young people, and we have also done a scoping study on this. It was released in March 2022. If you go up on our website, you'll be able to access it, and it talks about the impact. Now, as I say, it's a scoping study, so it talks about the impact on children and families of having children and families of having a maternal imprisonment as a result of maternal imprisonment. So this would be a piece of research that we would be challenging. Also, I know a piece of research we're hoping to do now in the end of this year will be the impact of stigmatization. We would know that there's a huge stigma attached of having a parent in prison, but we don't know what the impact is. So it's not considered an ACE. It's not one of the 10 ACEs. So we just don't know what impact it has, how resilient is the child, what's the supports required to ensure that they're not impacted by stigmatization, and how does it carry it into the future with them. So that's another piece of research that we will be conducting. Off the top of my head, I can send you an email if you want to link me with your email, and if I think of any more research that there's a gap in, I can let you know.
Thank you, Aisling. We have one more question. What kind of support services do you think would be appropriate to provide? And are there currently any non-state actors providing them?
Yes, we would have, in Ireland, we currently have Bedford Row, who are doing an absolutely amazing job, and they're Limerick based. But they have link workers who are working within the prison system too. So they have a Pacific family support worker who works within the prison, and they would work with the mothers in prison. I think there was mothers in prison, but they also do a bit of work with fathers too. One of the initiatives at the moment, because they have a lovely trauma-informed prison, and it's only after being opened. So one of the initiatives that they're doing at the moment will be doing homework clubs, where children in the children of the prisoners would come in and do their homework with their parents. And also there's a facility with there's a kitchen facility, and they would be involved in cookery programs and different arts and crafts initiatives with their parents. This is the first of their kind, and it's an absolutely amazing initiative. And they have a website, so you should go on and have a look at Bedford Row. It's phenomenal, to be fair. And we also have another service called New Directions, and it's in Wheatfield. It's connected to Wheatfield Prison in Dublin, and they provide supports to parents, majority of parents that have a partner in prison. As I said, these are charity-based organisations; they're not government funded, and that's where there's a problem, because their funding isn't reliable. So they have to go from year to year or every 3 years to look for funding.
Thank you, Aisling. There are no more questions, and we've reached the end of this session. Thank you very much, and we hope you'll join us in our next sessions throughout the day.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.